Yeah. Yeah, but I'm just watching. Yeah.
Means he
You-
built.
Bob, I mean, Yossel and Bob and myself, yeah, because we're the regulars, yeah. In this class, I think when we get to a siyum, we should sponsor a siyum. We should have a Sunday morning breakfast. We should sponsor it.
Rabbi,
I'll share with you.
You're killing me.
Well, no, look, don't worry, we're not there yet.
You're killing me before I'm dead.
Cost for shoelaces.
It's Leo's birthday. On the third. Oh, this guy's on the third?
Yeah.
Oh, let's have Shem, he's a huge help.
I know. That's
He's
why,
a huge help.
that's why I mentioned it to you.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, I just have to fix this.
Ella, what's Lamed Dalet?
1 minute.
Lamed Mem Dalet. Lemor? No. Must be some. All these shortcuts the Talmud has. My God. No wonder you have to study every day all your life.
How do you think you?
Some people do.
How do you think you do? How do you
That's
think
the-
you?
Actually, we all study every day of our life. As long as we're.
No, you're talking a
study
lot
every
of
day.
Gemara. That's true too. You're supposed to learn.
Okay, now we're gonna bring up the Gemara. Let's go back to Zoom. Okay, live stream, chat. Okay, we're on 61B, Davar Acher, another explanation of he built Kava. Okay, so if you can put that up, Reb Michal, it is good to see you, Reb Michal. Okay.
Why? It's not Vayiven?
Oh, I know Michal went. Oh, well. Okay. So I'll do share screen, go there. 61B. Don't worry, Bob. It's not anytime soon. I don't know when we're gonna finish. We still have like 4 long pages to do.
We gotta give, William's got a birthday, I just heard. We gotta do a breakfast for William.
What do you mean? He's not gonna be coming?
It's on the third, so let's see, Wednesday, Thursday. I thought on Friday, I believe. The 3rd of August.
So we're 61A.
It's Thursday, isn't it Thursday?
I thought the first was on Wednesday, no?
What?
No, the first today.
August 1. I think today's the 30th.
31st of July
31st, and tomorrow is the 1st.
of August. The summer is done. So, the 15th of Av is 40 days before the creation of the world on the 25th of Elul. So that is when the new year, that's when we begin preparing for Rosh Hashanah. Okay.
Rosh Hashanah.
It's upon us, my friends.
That when the Big Bang took place.
Here, look at this. There's the hand with that.
Yesterday.
should have a special breakfast
For William,
Tuesday, Wednesday.
he's the helper.
It's the 100th
Wednesday
anniversary of a yard site 100 years ago.
of
A
who?
yard site. President Warren G. Harding. August 2nd, 1920. And Coolidge became the president.
Oh. Coolidge, I remember because I used to go over his bridge.
Okay, Davar Acher. So this is where we're up to. Davar Acher, and let me do a share screen. I don't know where everyone else is today. Here, Davar Acher.
Where's over out there? You just told me by Yibin.
Yeah, Davacher. The first two words are Davacher, then Vayiven. We said one is Vayiven, that he braided her hair and decorated her as a bride before he brought her to Adam. Davacher, another explanation, Vayiven, and he built. The answer is that Hashem designed a woman for childbearing. In other words, and therefore women are built differently, and therefore they need to compete in sports differently. And Omer Rav Chisda and Hashem, and obviously these changes affect their state of being and all those things. And the same way Hashem made women differently, men and women differently physically, he made them different spiritually. And just like they complement one another physically, they complement one another spiritually. And therefore men have their mitzvot and their things, women have theirs. And it's utter foolishness for a woman to come along and say, I want to do what the men do, and vice versa. Vayiven, and he built. Rav Chisda says, "We Masnisa," and others say that this is taught in a brisa. In other words, Rav Chisda is a rabbi of the third generation of the rabbis of the Talmud. But others say that it was originally in a brisa taught in Israel. Malame, that he built, which is typically a term used for building a building. But Hashem built the woman like a building. Malamed Shabona Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Chava. Hashem built Chava Kavinyan Otsar, like one builds a storehouse. Ma or tzazeh. What do we find by a storehouse? That Kotzer Milamata. It is low above. It is narrow on top. It's built in a somewhat pyramid shape. Roch and wide below. Kadei L'Kabbalah Saperos, to receive the fruits. Because if it was the same width all along, it would be unstable and it would fall over. So you build it so that the maximum weight that is stored lower down. Like, for example, if you go to a factory, as I often do for kashrus, if you know how these racks they have that go to the ceiling in a warehouse, so the heaviest items in the machinery and the like are on the bottom, and the lighter items are on top, because you want your center of gravity low. So the same thing, she's not more narrow above. That women, in other words, obviously the women and men come in many sizes, but women typically have smaller upper bodies.
And what a woman worship today, just the opposite.
Or
skinny ones.
Or a chava malamata, and wide below. Women have wider hips and a wider pelvis. Kedei l'kabbalas of blood, to be able to carry the child comfortably. Right. So so in other words, Hashem made each gender according to what it needs. And men are narrower on the bottom and wider on top, so they can schlep things. So they can schlep all the packages. And he brought her to the man. Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Ben Elazar, Melamed Shanasha Kodesh Baruch Hu Shush Ben Adam Rishon, that he became the best man. He became the bridegroom, is the more correct term. The two Adam Rishon. In other words, that he was the one who brought the kala to him. That used to be the function of the best man. Mikan limda Torah derech eretz. From here we learn a proper behavior. Sheyachzer gadol imkoton b'shishminus. That it's appropriate for a greater individual to set out a person of lower rank to assist him in marriage. Well, it shouldn't feel bad. In other words, it's an honor for a greater person to assist the lesser person in his marriage, which is why we give the different honors at the chuppah to people who are respected people. Because to be involved in helping someone with a chasana is not below your dignity, because there is no greater mitzvah than to bring two Jews together. And therefore, we find in Tractate Tubot that the rabbis used to dance with all kinds of juggling and so on, even though they were great and distinguished rabbis at weddings, even the weddings of a very simple Jew, because there is no greater mitzvah than to bring joy to a couple and to help a Jewish couple get married. Now, Ulamandama Pertzov, The one who says parts of that that there were two sides, that there were originally two people, two faces.
Wait a minute, Parchuk is a face.
Right. So there were two. In other words, it was one person with two faces originally before Hashem split them up. So which one walked front and which one walked back, and which face faced forward. It's reasonable to say the man walked in front. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, a person should not walk behind a woman on a path, because you'll constantly be looking at her, and even your wife. In other words, you can't always help it, but one should not deliberately walk behind a woman lest you spend your time looking at her. If you happen on a bridge, which is narrow, see, so and try to squeeze by to the side so you're not walking behind her.
Walk backward.
It doesn't say that. And whoever walks behind a river, a woman in a river, Einlo has no portion in the world to come. Let me explain. In those days, many rivers did not have bridges. And if it was a small river, you crossed it by walking through it. Now, what do you do? In those days, everyone wore robes. No, there were no bridges and no ferries. People walked through creeks. They didn't have a lot of small creeks and rivers, and Bavel has lots of creeks and rivers. You walk through it. And since you don't want to get your clothing wet and dirty, what do? You lift your robe up, right? So if you're walking behind a woman crossing a river and you deliberately, on purpose, walk behind her to see her exposed skin when she lifts up her dress to go through the river, you have no portion in the world to come, because you are inciting bad thoughts in yourself, and also obviously making the woman feel very uncomfortable. So it's a double sin. It is both a sin on your part for bad thoughts and what we call today sexual harassment.
Really?
Yeah.
Lo yanakeh.
Right. And so Rashi says when you deliberately stare at her, sometimes you can't help it.
Exactly.
Yeah. He has no portion in the world to come. And Tanarabban, we learned in the Brisa, someone who counts money for a woman from his hand to her hand to look at her. In other words, you're doing business, but you take your time giving change so you can stare at her beauty. And again, histako means to stare. You don't stare at someone to derive benefit from her beauty unless it's your wife.
Change. She reaches for the penny pocket.
It makes it slow. Right. Exactly. Even if he has as much Torah as Moshe Lo Yinoka, he shall not be absolved from the punishment of Gehenna, of purgatory, of the place where souls get punished after death.
What's Medina here mean?
Dina, the law, the din, the verdict. He will not be held from the verdict of punishment in Gehenna.
Yeah, I read it as a Medina.
Shenemar yod li yod lo yinoka. That hand to hand evil shall not go unpunished. In other words, even if you receive the Torah from the hand of God like Moses, you will not be absolved from the law of Gehenna. Why? Because it is forbidden to excite the evil inclination, and it's forbidden to engage in behavior which obviously is invasive of the woman's privacy and integrity. Now, this is something I pointed out once in a sermon on the week we read about Manoach and Shimshon, that Manoach's wife was much more learned and much smarter than him. Even though your friend isn't sure about that, I am sure. And one of the things we see, Omer Rav Nachman says Manoach, unlike his wife, was an ignoramus. The Chsiv, Manoach followed his wife, and really you should walk in front. Moscow for Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak argues, though, he says there's no proof here that Manoach was an
But,
ignoramus.
but then, wait a minute. In this case, it made sense because she is the one that got her husband to go after him because she knew where she was going, and he did.
Well, maybe she could have told him where to go. Elamata, but Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak
She
has a
did what they told him where to go.
but Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak has a stronger question. Elamata, like he freaks out, we're gonna die. We're gonna says, no, if we were gonna die, he wouldn't have taken a korban from us, right? Elamata Gabe Elkanah, the Chsiv by Elkanah, it's written, Vayelech Elkanah Akari Ishta, Elkanah followed his wife. And Elisha, it says, with regards to the woman who asked him to revive her son from the dead, Vayakum Vayelech Acharel.
So right here, we have a problem
Yeah.
because it could be interpreted two ways. Physically, he went after her, or halach achre because she was the smart one.
Okay, so good. Yossel,
Smarter
you have
than
predicted what did you ever learn this Gemara? Because
No.
you predicted what the Gemara is going to say. Very good. Yossel
Really?
predicted, yes, what the Gemara will say.
Oh my God.
So by Elkanah and by Elisha, you have a Gemara.
He's
coming.
a very good student.
That by Elkanah and Elisha, it says that Elkanah followed his wife. And when and it says when she brought Shmuel to the Beit Hamikdash, the Mishkan, by Elisha, it says he followed the Shunammite, who showed her dead son. Do you then think that they actually walked behind the woman when they were righteous men? It means to say that he followed her words and her advice. Noach followed the words and advice of his wife because he knew she was smarter.
Never saw that in my life.
Amar Rav Ashi, Lamaida Kama Rav Nachman, according to Rav Nachman's opinion that Manoach was an ignoramus, because according to Rav Nachman, it means literally Manoach walked behind his wife. If he was an ignoramus, then he even did not learn what children learn in the cheder, in the house of their teacher. Shenamar, as it says in the book of Bereshis, in Parshas Toldos, Rivka, not Toldos, sorry, in Vayera, Kaisara,
Rabbi?
got up, Venarosaha and her maid damsels, and they rode upon the camels. They followed the man, they didn't go before the man. And it makes sense because if there's something dangerous on the way, you want the man to encounter it, not the woman. It's his job to be the protector. It's better to walk behind a lion and not behind a woman, because the lion is unlikely to turn around and bite you, but staring at a woman destroys your soul. If you walk behind her to stare at her. I mean, you're walking on Fifth Avenue, there's nothing to be done. You're walking behind 10,000 women.
Well,
but it's where your purpose is.
A lion, you better walk behind the lion than in front of the lion.
Right, but the point being that if one walks behind a woman to ogle her, that is, as I said, an avera on two counts. One, because you're inciting evil inclination, and the other is you're probably making her uncomfortable. We should walk behind a woman and not behind idolatry. When there's a procession of idols, like when they carry these statues in Mexico or something, it's better to, even if you have to walk behind a woman, it's better to walk behind her because it'll look like you're part of the procession and you're honoring the statue.
Wait a minute. So what are you saying?
In other words,
you should not walk behind a woman?
No, it's better to walk behind a woman if you have a choice than to walk behind an idolatrous procession.
Yeah, okay.
Because the woman, so don't look, but the idolatrous procession, it looks like you're part of the procession and worshiping the idol.
Yeah.
But if you want Shabbos, the woman usually follows the man. No?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. Or walk next to you. Don't walk behind me. Remember the song we used to sing in camp? Achori Avodah Zarah, beside is fine. Achori Avodah Zarah, behind idols, below achor b'nei knesset and not behind the shul when the community is praying. In other words, if you have only one shul in town, and you have a choice between walking behind an idolatrous procession and walking past the shul, it's better to walk behind the idolatrous procession. Why? Because if you pass behind the shul when the tzibur is davening, it looks like, assuming there's only one shul in town, it looks like you are rejecting the mitzvah of praying with the community. You're rejecting the community. You're right there, they're davening, and you walk right past it, right? So that shows that you don't care about davening with the minyan. And therefore, it's only said we're not carrying something. Because if you're carrying something, you're busy with your work. You had to go to work early. They daven at 7. You had to take a truckload of potatoes somewhere, right? So if you're carrying something, if you're obviously working and you had to start work early, so then we don't blame you. It's only said if there's no other door. In those days, the way the shuls were set up, the door was always always opposite the Aron Kodesh. So you came in, you didn't disturb the people davening. Like in our shul here.
You came from the west door.
Right, we come from the west in the big shul.
Yeah.
But if there's another door, there's not leis lanva, there's no problem. So in the shul that has multiple doors, the issue is where you walk, you're not carrying anything, you clearly are free as a bird, and you walk right past the only door to the shul and don't go in. And it's the only minyan and the only shul. And it's also not said when you're not riding a donkey or a horse, but if you're riding a donkey, that doesn't apply. Why? Because that demonstrates that, because if you're riding a donkey, you're clearly on the way somewhere. And since you had to leave early, you had to leave early. What are you going to do? It's only said if you're not wearing tefillin, but if you're wearing tefillin, this doesn't apply.
What do you mean?
People used to wear tefillin all day, the righteous people. So if you're wearing tefillin, it shows you're a righteous person, and therefore you wouldn't walk past the shul blithely unless you had something important to do. In other words, if you have something important to do, we excuse you. But if you're just strolling along, you clearly have no cares in the world, and you're headed for the Starbucks instead of the shul, well, that's a problem.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Please say again, I'm sorry, I was a little bit back, about Elisha in 23.
Right. So Elisha, when the woman came to him and said that a child had died, Elisha followed her and to see the child.
Yeah.
So the question is, did he actually walk behind her? So no, it means to say that he went where she showed him. He followed her directions.
Thank you.
Rav,
Well, that's what I said about Shimshon too. That's exactly what it was.
yeah. Well, that's the other opinion than Reb Nachman. It's a machlokes.
Yeah.
Now, since we're talking about the wiles of the evil inclination and the way it tries to get us into trouble, so Amar Rav says, Yetzahara doma lizvuv v'yoshe ben shtei niftachei halev, that it sits between the two openings of the heart. Shenemar, as it says,
you mean like a fly?
Yeah.
That what?
It says Zavuve Maves, the dead flies, Yavish Yabia Shemen Rokeach, make the ointment of the perfumer fetid and putrid. In other words, if you get into beautiful, very, very fine fragrances, you get dead flies, it makes them yucky. And the idea being that the heart, which is meant to be used, in other words, your feelings should be lofty and to holy things, it makes it it causes you to use your passions and your enthusiasms for bad things.
The brain, not the heart.
Yeah, but the heart is, because the heart is affected by the emotions, it beats faster and slower depending on a person's feelings. So the Talmud uses the heart as a description of what goes on, of a person's feelings. Because the heart is where your feelings that originate in the brain are felt. Ushmuel Omar. Shmuel says, Kimin chitahu domer. It's like a grain of wheat. I'll explain this in a minute. Shenamar, as it says, the Pesach chatas rovet, at the door of the heart. God told Cain, as a door of the heart, sin crouches. So it is like a grain of wheat.
Oh,
Now, what does that mean? Like a grain of wheat? So we have to see what the Ben Ish Chai has to say.
why do you have to go to the shrine?
He usually has something interesting to say. So the Ben Ish Chai says, why do we compare him to the Yetzer Hara to a fly? He says that if flies don't care about where they are. In other words, a fly will settle on the head of a king as much as it will settle on the head of an ordinary person, right? Flies go everywhere.
Yeah.
And the idea is that that no one should imagine that they're free of the Yetzer Hara. Even Moshe Rabbeinu has to be careful not to let his evil inclination get the better of him. The Yetzer Hara affects everyone. That's the premise.
Petach chatat rovetz.
Right. Now, but why chita?
Chita. A grain of fig.
Yeah, great, right? Hold on. Let me there's a beautiful Ben Yehuda there. I just have to get it. So why is it compared to wheat? So he says that wheat is the basic staple of civilized people, right? You eat bread. I mean, most of us eat bread and so on. In other words, wheat is what, made civilization possible. That's the normal food of people for many, many generations. So he says that that we compare the Yetzer Hara to wheat to teach you that the Yetzer Hara needs to be managed, but it can't be destroyed. The same way that everyone needs wheat. Wheat is the basic, bread is the staff of life, the basic staple of life. Without the inclination, the evil inclination, which means to say the desire for physical gratification, you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't work, you wouldn't sleep, you wouldn't pursue a wife and get married and have children. Without the drives that can be bad if you use them wrong, hence the Yetzer Hara, without the physical drives, no one would work, no one would eat, no one would have children, and so on.
What happens when somebody becomes a drug?
So therefore, we say the Yetzer Hara is like wheat, that on one hand can make trouble, right? The Yetzer Hara can make trouble. On the other hand, be aware it's necessary. You can't completely ignore it, because a person who ignores their physical needs and drives completely will never get married, will never have children, will never work, and so on. Now, the following is figurative. I wouldn't take it literally. It's like a parable. But we do know that the kidneys and internal organs do now influence behavior. We know a lot about their influence on behavior, neurologically and hormonally. Nevertheless, we learned in the Brisa, a person has two kidneys. One gives him good advice, one gives him bad advice. One pushes him to what the Yetzer Tov speaks from one, the Yetzer Hara from the other.
So they're getting in trouble already.
Umestavra, the Tova liyamino, that the right is good and the left is bad. As written, Leiv Chacham liyamino, the heart of a right man is of a wise man is to the right, and the heart of a foolish man is to the left. Now, obviously, people have only one kidney, still have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. So this is a parable. It's a metaphor.
Yeah, good point.
Now, and we'll learn more about the kidneys, Mitzvah Shem, next tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Right.
Layot. Last line on the page.
Yeah.
Have to remember.
And you also remind everyone, I'll be away Wednesday. We don't say Tachnun Wednesday. Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av.
The 15th of Av is a day we don't say Tachnun. It was a holiday